Welcome everybody who is joining. We will be starting soon, and I also appreciate people who are saying that they can see the PowerPoint and talking about computers being muted because of the echo. I am going to say, as you are joining, we will have a question and answer time that I'm going to ask you to unmute, or you can also put information into the chat box as well. But if you will go ahead and mute yourselves now, that would be great. In a little bit, we'll mute people who haven't muted themselves, but I would love for you to be able to see how you can kind of go click on your face where you are in the video, and that you can see where you can mute yourself that way. And we have just a minute or so before we get going, so I'll wait just that one more minute, and then we'll get started. So happy to see so many of you here already. I am totally great, and we're all set, and you can close it. And nope, you're so wonderful. I was going to ask you to in a moment, but we're set, so I'm good. Thank you so much. Thanks. All right. Well, welcome everybody, and thank you so much for being here this afternoon. We're going to go ahead and get started and talking about the Student Support and Academic Enrichment Grant that has opened up, and we're really excited this year. Last year, we were able to have it as a competitive grant, and this year, through the Every Student Succeeds Act, they have shifted Title IV Part A to be formula. I will share more about what that means and how we can move forward with that as we go through the webinar. But just as a first time through, is what that means is we use the same formula that Title I uses to allocate funds for districts. What that also means is that while the funds are using the same formula, when you submit your application, you do not have to use the funds at each individual school in the same way that Title I funds are used. Now, I also want to say that while the formula is the same, it does not mean the funding is the same. So if you get $2 for Title I, that does not mean that you get $2 for Title IV Part A. It's, while it's the same formula, it almost means that it's like the proportionate amount. So if you currently receive 2% of funds that come to the state of Title I, or you're eligible for that, then you would also receive 2% of the funds that come for Title IV Part A. Again, I will talk more about that as we get into the PowerPoint and also into the conversation. So just going through this, and by the way, for people who have just signed in, I do want to say one of the things that we will for sure have going on is information and then time for questions and answers. So if you'll kind of just hold tight, this will probably take me about 10 to 15 minutes to go through all the information, and then the rest of our time will actually be for questions and answers. Thanks so much. So first of all, the history and purpose is that Title IV-A comes from the Every Student Succeeds Act and the Elementary Secondary Education Act. This became law in December of 2015. And Title IV Part A is really about how are we supporting students and how are we providing academic enrichment. And in Utah, we focus on the well-rounded education part and the safe and healthy. Through Title IV-A, well-rounded, safe, and healthy are also the two predominant areas, but there is also the improving the effective use of technology that is a third area. In Utah, we also include the effective use of technology, but our primary focus in this grant is well-rounded education and safe and healthy students. And I know most of us are muted, but I'm hearing a little bit of background noise, so if you'll please just check to make sure that you have muted yourself, that would be wonderful. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and go on. The application the application has actually been ready for a little while, and my goal is to make sure that we have funds that you could start using as soon as summer hits, for example, which is why I was trying to get the grant application out as soon as possible and then having it due to the State Board of Education on March 1st, 2019. So notice that, like, I'm so sorry, but like somebody's eating, I think, and is not on mute. Jerry, can you mute everybody?
I can. I gave you host rights, so you'll have to do it. Sorry.
Nope, you're great. I know how to do it if I go to individual people. And I can see how to mute me, but how do I mute?
I don't know if I'm muted.
Okay, sounds great. I'll keep going. So you guys, the application is also available online on the Title IV-A website. I will have that later in the PowerPoint. And then also please note that there is a letter of intent that is due. The letter of intent is a very short survey that asks you to put down who in your LEA is in charge of the Title IV-A grant and what their role happens to be. So the whole purpose of that is to say, yes, we are planning on submitting an application for Title IV-A, and here is the person who is going to be in charge of that. So that is how easy that letter of intent is, and that's due on February 1st. It is right inside the application of how to get to the letter of intent in the instructions document. Notice that, again, the goal is to make it so that funds are available from May of 2019 through August of 2020. And then each LEA, we mentioned this, based on the same formula set up for Title I. The formula sheet will be on the Title IV Part A website. And I'm sorry to say, if you're here today to be like, how much funding are we getting? I'm working with Jamie Barrett, and she has been setting up the Title I fund and making sure that's done first so that she can then do the Title IV Part A. She was hoping to have that done by the end of last week, but it's like literally just about any day. So and she's also going to make sure that we have an estimate. So what I can say again, and I know I said this at the beginning, is if you know what % of funds you get through the state for Title I, you can anticipate to get or to be allotted the same % of funds for Title IV Part A. And then just like last year, the Title IV Part A application includes a needs assessment, the research to support your project, a work plan, and budget with justification. One of the things that is nice with that is if you already have Title I funds and you've already done the needs assessment for Title I, you do not have to do a separate needs assessment for Title IV Part A. You can actually say, this was our needs assessment for Title I, and we now want to specifically hone in on this part of that needs assessment to focus our Title IV Part A funding. So you do not have to do a separate needs assessment for that. And then notice that when it comes to Title IV Part A, LEAs may partner with organizations. They can apply as a consortium of 2 or more LEAs. So for example, if there are a couple of districts or locations that want to combine together to create an opportunity as a consortium, that's absolutely available and something that you can do. And then also, like this past year, we've had, it says use other ESEA program funds to strengthen and coordinate complementary services. I'll share with you that it's not just ESEA funds to strengthen and coordinate. So you can say, how are we using Title I funds and how can I have more leverage with Title I using Title IV-A? You can do that. But another thing that you can also do is, like, for example, we have a district this year who has really taken their DTL grants and combined it with their Title IV Part A grant. And the Title IV Part A is really focused on professional learning to strengthen core content areas, but the DTL grant is to help them implement effective use of technology. I am seeing a question that has come up, and this is great. It says, what is the total dollar amount of the grant statewide? The total amount of the dollar amount of the grant statewide is $5,700,000. So last year it was only just over $2 million, and so the state amount has increased significantly, which we're super excited about. And so the amount of flow-through funds to go out to districts is approximately $5.7 million. So notice that the needs assessment, one more time, can come from your Title I needs assessment. And then also notice that within that, the priorities fall under two content areas, the well-rounded and also the safe and healthy. Grants must include how they'll effectively use technology to support the content areas if receiving $30,000 or more in funding. So if your LEA is receiving less than $30,000, you do not have to include effective use of technology. But if your allocated funding is more than $30,000, you also want to include how you would use some amount for effective use of technology. But let me share this. It means that it would be that your grant should include effective use of technology, but when it comes to the budget, and this is in the instructions for the application, at most 20% of your grant can be for technology, and of that, 20% of those funds can be for the infrastructure. So at most, 4% of the grant can be for infrastructure, but up to 20% of the grant can be for effective use of technology. And by the way, that's true whether you're receiving more or less than $30,000 in funding. Something else that's true, and this is also true in other parts of ESSA, is the evidence-based requirement. In our application last year and in the application this year, it talks about what is the research that you are using to implement the program that you are applying for. And so you want to make sure that you are talking about evidence-based activities that are going to improve student outcomes. And then the effectiveness also depends on the local context. So what are you specifically working on that connects to your needs assessment to improve the outcomes for students? And with that being said, I would like to share with you that according to ESSA, when you talk about what is evidence-based, strong evidence is that you have at least one well-designed and well-implemented experimental study. So when you're filling out this part of the application, you want to make sure that you're not only saying, here's the research behind why we're doing the work plan that we're doing, but you also want to talk about whether or not your grant has strong, moderate, or promising evidence. So in other words, where is the study or what was the research that was done to show that this is going to make an impact. Notice that also that you want to have strong evidence, moderate evidence, or promising evidence. And with promising evidence, that you can have the designed and implemented correlated study with statistical controls, or demonstrates a rationale based on high-quality research findings or positive evaluation. And I know that we had quite a few people who submitted that last year. So it doesn't mean that you would not qualify if your evidence was promising and has the research findings or positive evaluation. If you have the experimental study or the quasi-experimental study, of course, that's better. But I will say that this is not a competitive grant this year. So as long as your research is recent and shows that it has positive impact in the focus that you're having, you would be accepted. Here's another example, and this comes from REL, the 4 tiers of evidence-based intervention. This is the same thing that was on the last slide. However, this just kind of has it broken down so that you can see what strong evidence looks like. So you're talking about the experimental study, and then what is the effect size, and you know, that there's no overriding negative effects, that sort of thing. And then I'm just leaving this on here for a second so that people can see this in the future. This is being recorded, so you can also like pause and check out more of this. And then also I will include where you can find this online, because this is, like I said, it's from REL. So If you happen to have your grant application or the instructions for the grant application, if on the instructions page, on page 3, it talks about the importance of making sure that your needs assessment connects to a priority, and then that your priority then connects with your work plan and what you are doing moving forward. So please notice that the priorities underneath well-rounded educational opportunities, as well as the priorities under safe and healthy students, are listed on page 3 of the instructions of the grant application. And so I just want to kind of give you a moment to look at that, because I don't want to read that out loud, but it is really important to know that every grant application needs to connect to at least one of these 8 priorities, and it can respond to more than one of these 8 priorities. So you can actually say that our grant application is going to focus on the goal of implementing Utah core standards, which is A2, as well as B3, which is integrating positive behavior interventions and wraparound supports for students to promote dropout prevention, school-based mental health, and physical wellness resources. So your grant application can address one or multiple priorities that are listed here. Again, you just want to make sure that your priorities connect to your needs assessment, and that both of those things then connect to your work plan. The next slide shows the effective use of technology, and I just want to one more time say this about the effective use of technology is we love thinking of that as how it is going to be used to support the work that is from priorities A, well-rounded education, and B, safe and healthy students. Grants that focus on effective use of technology will be asked to be modified. This is the effective use of technology is, think of it as being as in support of the other 2 areas. And I know that Todd Call, who is the Digital Teaching and Learning Coordinator here at the State Office, and then also Sarah Young, who just changed positions, that their conversation is they really want to make sure that the Digital Teaching and Learning Grant is strong and focused, and that you can think of how to enhance and supplement with this grant if you wanted to do that. And then also, just because I happen to see in the chat box, and I'm great with this, the PowerPoint and webinar will both be available. The PowerPoint will be on the Title 4A website, and the webinar that's being recorded will also become available on the Title 4 Part A website. So I just kind of also wanted to show you guys that when you do the grant application, that you'll see a chart that looks like this, where you will talk about here is your goal, and the goal will talk about how does your needs assessment address this goal. Also, like, what are your long-term outcomes for the goal? What is the instrument that you're going to use to measure the goal? And then finally, this is the priority. So, like, for example, when I mentioned earlier that if your priority is A2, which is well-rounded, implementing Common Core state standards, that needs to be what is in, sorry, I just clicked on it, but needs to be what is in this box right here. So this box is what is the priority that you're referring to? How does your needs assessment connect to that priority? And then based on the goal and the needs assessment, what is your long-term outcome, and how are you going to measure that over time? And so the next slide is to also remind us, and this part is in the grant, is that we are going to supplement, not supplant. And so in the supplementing, thinking about, you can use it to provide additional services, staff, programs, or materials that are not provided with state or local resources absent federal funds. So note that this is something where you can hire staff. And last year, when people asked that question, I said the grant does allow for that, but you may want to be cautious of that just because we were not sure about the future of Title 4A. The future of Title 4A is looking stronger. So, you know, if hiring additional staff to meet the goals is something that would be helpful, that is allowed. Basically, one of the things that we are saying is make sure that you are supplementing with the items in your budget and that you are not supplanting. So materials, supplies, equipment, all of those things are appropriate and allowed. What's not allowed is, sorry, and these are examples of allowable. I was thinking we were on the next slide. So hiring staff, having professional development, salaries, supplemental resources and equipment, and then leveraging resources of other federal and state funds to support a holistic approach. What is not allowed is supplanting funds that would otherwise come from federal or state programs. So paying for costs associated with conference attendance, which by the way includes travel, those things are not allowed. Also the purchase of like personal items. So, you know, don't buy audio equipment for, actually I want to be careful how I say this, but basically don't buy cell phones for all the teachers or for administration. Don't buy cell phones at all. And then thinking about the technology that's allowed in the digital teaching and learning grant. And if the technology is allowed in the digital teaching and learning grant, then it can be allowed here. If it's not, then it would not be. So like also, you know, like please don't buy cars, please don't acquire real property, rent space, or obtain capital expenditures. This is pretty consistent across ESSA in general. So thinking about what you know for Title I, if you are allowed to use it in Title I, then that's great. You could use it here as well. If you're not allowed to use it in Title I, then you would not be allowed to use those funds likewise here. And the high leverage strategies is something that is new that we have this year. And we wanted to create those so for well-rounded education, safe and healthy students, and then also effective use of technology. These documents are currently available underneath the Title IV Part A websites. And then here's the Google Docs. I'm actually in just a moment going to continue sharing my screen, but changing it from being the PowerPoint to what you would see on the website so that you have access to that. But also here on the webinar, we'll also show you where you can access the Google documents and then also kind of give some examples of that. So here's the mathematics example. Notice that we are talking about strategies that relate to Section 2, Part B. So A1 is implement Utah course standards. And then these are just samples, and they're just small, but they reference ways that you could consider using, and in this case, it's just because mathematics is the example, how you could use mathematics examples in your application. And so notice that one of the things that we have going on is Utah's multi-tiered system of supports document. So when you're talking about making sure that students are on grade level course standards, that referencing and having use of that is something to consider. Please note that this is not comprehensive. It is not intended to be, we would love for you to be thinking outside of the box and using other resources and research to submit your application, but also if you were looking for some additional support or some other options and suggestions. Here's another example that happens to be from safe and healthy students. Notice that they're listing from priority B, so B1, B2, B3, B4, and B5, and some little pieces of information of what are some things to consider potentially when you are creating and working on your application. I do want to stress this because I want to be very clear that the high leverage strategies documents are meant to be a support, not to be guidance, that by no means are these intended to be prescriptive at all. We really love the applications and the grants that are being implemented this year and feel like people who are doing things and thinking outside of the box and but using research to support the work that they are doing has been what's been super helpful. And then just one more example is PE. Notice that there's the A1, A2, and A3 here, and then also A couple of us have also added from priority B, here's some other things that you may be considering, and from priority C, the effective use of technology. So like, for example, the same thing is true with mathematics. We have the same comment for priority C. Please look at the priorities and identify if your needs assessment lends itself to integrating health and PE and effective use of technology, or if it lends itself to integrating math and the effective use of technology. With that being said, the Title IV Part A, all information underneath the Grants tab is located here. This is what the Grants tab looks like. And like I said, I'm actually going to show you what it looks like now because the high leverage strategies has changed a bit. And there's also a place where you can see where the funding, the formula sheet, because I wasn't able to send that out in advance, it will find its home here. And I will also say that I mentioned this at the very beginning. I've been speaking with Jamie Barrett, and we do want to make sure that we are providing the most accurate dollar amount possible. But I know that some people are feeling like if my grant is for $1,000 or $100,000, I don't know how I understand very much that you can't be writing your grant until you at least have a ballpark figure of what you would qualify for. So I super apologize. It is not something that is already up on the website, but as many of you know, the grants management system is new this year, and Jamie is doing great work. She just has been super busy, and so our goal is to get that up as soon as possible. And I also know that many of you have been emailing me asking about that, and I'm just she's working and she's trying to make sure things are getting approved, and then we'll be going from there. I'm going to go ahead and answer things that are on the chat box right now, and then I am going to make sure that I show the site. But I will also say, other than that, that is the end of the presentation that I have, other than answering questions and then also making sure that you see where everything is on the website, which I'm also going to say that probably many of you were able to join the meeting today by being on the website and clicking that link. So I'm going to start with where it says, is it possible to add information to the Title I needs assessment to strengthen the grant? And the answer is absolutely. And when it comes to submitting your grant application, I know some of you have a really long, extensive Title I needs assessment. If you have that, you can attach your needs assessment to the grant and not have to have it count as part of your 10-page. So as you're reading the instructions, it talks about how the narrative can be 10 pages. I know some of you, if you included your full needs assessment from Title I, that would pretty much take up half of your application or so. So if you are using the Title I needs assessment, you can actually just link it in there or attach it and not have that count as part of the 10 pages. But you can also add information specifically. So say, for example, if in your Title I grant, your area of focus in Title I happens to be on student outcomes and student achievement, which is one of the first parts of the Title I needs assessment. But say, for example, in Title IV Part A, you actually wanted it to be on something with community outreach, you can, on the Title IV Part A, really just share and show that part of what you want to incorporate to strengthen your grant. Absolutely. It says, we've been using Mastery Connect for teachers to track data and talk with kids about their success. We are not planning on renewing our contract next year because we don't have the funds. Could we use this grant to continue using this program? And the answer to that is you can use Mastery Connect and then also just show how you are using that to show the effective use of technology and how that is going to increase whatever your other priorities happen to be that's related to the grant. Whoever answered, Lisa, you asked that question. I hope that answered it. So in other words, you can't say, I want to do Mastery Connect that is tracking data about academics and then have your priorities then also need to align. So whatever your they all need to come together. So it can't be like I want to spend money on Mastery Connect for this, but then not have it connect to the priorities from Part A and B. And I would love if you would let me know if that made sense to you and that answers that question. The next one says, if schools do not apply for Title IV-A, will those funds be redistributed to schools who have applied? And the answer is that once I know of schools, of districts or charter schools that are not applying for Title IV-A, it is absolutely a goal to consider how to redistribute those funds. There are portions of Title IV-A that allow for different things. So right now, much of it is flow through straight to the LEAs, but for those who do not use the Title IV-A funds, it will depend on how much that is, and then there probably will be at least some amount that is redistributed to the LEAs who are using those funds, but I'm not sure what that will look like because I need to see where that goes. And then the next question says, our school does not get a percentage for Title I funds. We get a targeted amount. How does that work with the funds available? And that is a really good question. I have had that asked. I actually just saw that for the first time last night. And I am so sorry to say that I have not found the answer to that yet. I know that I want to say that the way that the funds for Title IV-A are determined are exactly the same as they are for Title I, but I'm not sure. I'm not as familiar with Title I apparently as I thought I was, because I'm not sure what that looks like. And I'm not sure if that actually becomes something that for LEAs who are not getting, who are not going to accept the funds, if we can turn around and provide that as an option for those who do get the targeted amount, or if that is, or what that looks like. That is something that I'm planning to speak with both Jamie, Sandy Grant, and then also Becky Donaldson. And then also, this is a great question, is when it comes down to it, it's not about do charters or districts get the funds, it is does your LEA qualify for Title I funding? And that's the message that I've been given, is that the same formula that is used to determine how much funding each LEA, so that's charter or district, how much funding they could potentially receive, is the exact same formula that is used for Title IV Part A, which is why when it comes to the targeted amount, I know that I need to look into what that looks like for Title IV-A. And then this is another great question. It says, if we did not accept Title I funds, do we still qualify for Title IV? And the answer is yes. And I'm just going to say this, probably for LEAs who qualified for Title I but did not accept them, maybe because the funds, actually, there are different reasons why people may or may not have accepted Title I funds. So I want to say that the fast answer is yes, you do still qualify for Title IV. I will say that you do still need to do a needs assessment, but the needs assessment does not need to be as comprehensive as the Title I needs assessment. And then I'm also going to say this, just because some of you may or may not be thinking about this, I am having people who are putting up questions that are going out to the whole group, which is great, but I also have people who are submitting questions to me that are coming to my personal, that's doing the, the chat message that's coming to me privately. And so if you want to put a question out there that is private, I guess nobody would know that the question is coming from you. So if anyone's like, I want to ask this question, but I'm not sure how to ask it, or you don't want everyone else to see it, please note that you can go ahead and submit it to me privately, and then I can answer it for the whole group. And while we are doing that, I did want to share where to see things on the Title 4A site. So in the screen that I'm sharing, I'm shifting from the PowerPoint to the website. If you were to come to USBE, on the USBE homepage from here, and you go to Departments and Programs, the Elementary Secondary Education Act Department, and then here's Title IV Part A. Within the grants that you can get online, which I'm like, if you knew how to, within the grant where you get online, it also can take you straight to this page, which is where all Title IV Part A information is located and will be located as we move forward. So going over to the Grants tab, there's the application checklist. There's the application for 1920. This is just for you. You don't turn this in. This second document is actually what is being submitted for the Title IV Part A. And then notice that, and in fact, very soon, I was actually hoping this would happen today, but very soon this will be the top line of this page, because it's the instructions is where you really want to spend most of your time to make sure that you have all the information when you are submitting your application. And then in the PowerPoint, I mentioned that these are some of the high-leverage strategy Google Forms. I do know that I'm expecting to get a couple of more of these, so please do check back. I know that the Fine Arts is planning on submitting something, and I also understand that Social Studies is planning on submitting something. So please do check back, and because again, those are just there to support, not necessarily, nor are they intended to be guidelines. We also have the timeline that's in the instructions document, but also if you just wanted to see a quick timeline of what's there. I have seen a couple of more questions. So I just see that someone said, I found online that Utah received $81 million in Title 1A funds for FY19. So, which would be absolutely wonderful. So you are up. So thank you for putting that up, Jeanette. Knowing that Utah received $81 million in Title 1A and about $6 million in Title 4A, we actually received $5.9 million, but after you take out the state activities and other information, we have most of it as flow through to LEAs. It's about 5.75-ish that we have that will be going out to LEAs. So if you wanted to think about what that looks like proportionally, that's a great way to do that. When it says, is there a grant application in Doc or Google Doc form rather than PDF? I am actually just realizing, thank you so much for asking that question. When we had it up before, I think it is because of the ADA, because it is intended to be a Word document, the application itself. But I realized that by putting it up in here that it was changed to a PDF and converted. So thank you for bringing that to my attention. I will make sure that we send, like last year it was just a Word document online. I will send it out as a Word document, and then also see what we can do about changing that. Thank you for bringing that to my attention, because I didn't even notice that. And then someone else also just said that their information is that Title I is $77.3 million for FY 2019. So that may actually also have to be the difference between flow through to LEAs and other expenses that go on with that. So either way, whether if you put 77 million or 81 million and compare that to the 5.8, I think that you'll see that it's pretty much what you can guesstimate is whatever your Title I funds are, that Title 4A looks like it will be just under 10% of what your Title I funds are. And again, I know Jamie just wants to make sure that she's accurate when we put this up. But when I have it does seem like that. So that if Title I is around $77–78 million, or even 80 million, that knowing that ours is just under 6 gives you an idea that it's whatever you are receiving for Title I or whatever you qualify for with Title I, Title IV-A would be just under 10%. And Chris, thank you so much. I'm honestly embarrassed, but I'm so glad you guys are on top of this. I am loving it. It says if you download the application that is on the website, it looks like it is, you can enter it. So you can enter the information within the PDF, which is great to know. Okay. With that being said, I would love if someone would like to unmute their microphone and ask questions instead of typing something in, that's great as well. I have really appreciated you guys being here today and also really appreciated all of the questions. I think I'm going to take some of the questions that are on here today and note that I've also had a couple of similar emails that I've replied to, which is super wonderful. This will help me create a frequently asked questions document that I can also put on the website. So I really, really appreciate your being here today and really, really appreciate the questions that you have been asking. And I also, I don't know if I've said this out loud or if that you just hear it in my voice, but I'm so sorry that the formula sheet is not quite here. But I'm hoping you'll see that like on the website where it says SSAE formula sheet, that's where it will be located. And then trust me, I will send out emails to anyone and everyone that I can think of and ask people to help me spread the word that the formula sheet is up. I know that it's difficult to begin writing the grant when you're not sure, but I do hope that the conversation about if you know what you qualify for with Title I, that it will also help you with anticipating what that would look like for Title IV-A. I'm going to be quiet now so that you guys can ask questions verbally. And I'm also going to say that if you don't have any questions, just one more time, I'm going to say thank you so much for being here today. And if you have any questions in the future, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. And I can also answer those questions via email. And thank you so much for being here.